Alright, what's cooking? We're back with another film analysis video, and this time we're really looking at part 2, and I believe I'll make it a 3-part series of Ridley Scott's 1979 movie Alien. And what you see behind me is from the game Alien Isolation from 2014, I believe, which is a very good horror game as well. So where we last left off, we had Kane essentially being repelled down into the cave structure. We see here Kane being repelled down into this sort of dark, lurid cave, and he's eager to continue his exploration. He encumbers this rather mystic sort of blue mist that's surrounding the eggs. It's through his sort of continuous excavation of this amphibic layer of the cave. He does shortly comment on the blue mist before essentially tripping besides one of the eggs. It's as if the experience has left him working on a sort of overload of the stimulus apparatus, and we see him being overwhelmed by both the prospect of discovering new life as well as being absorbed in a sort of like tunnel-like focus. Interestingly, there are theories pertaining to the supplementary features of the Blu-ray disc, which was carried over from the laser disc of the movie, which suggests that the blue mist works as a sort of alarm system for the facehuggers. It's essentially warning of potentially potential incubators, which is certainly how Kane is gonna end his faith, unfortunately. It's as if in many ways that the movie implants a sort of direct warning about the primordial death weapon contained within our reptilian ancestors as it pertains to these eggs. And, well, there is a sort of evolutionary kinship between the reptilians and our own Homo sapiens. You see the evolving evolution of the 3-chambered heart, for example, into our own 4-chambered heart. So there's certainly this evolutionary kinship. And it's something that's certainly not been forgotten throughout human history, that we have this sort of fear of omnious reptiles, especially in the form of carnivorous snakes, for example. This is best portrayed perhaps in the Garden of Eden in the Bible, for example, but there are many portrayals throughout human history. The eggs themselves also invoke a certain biological hibernation chamber. Just as the crew is waking up aboard the Nostradamus, the facehugger is being awakened to life. We see this incorporated in the first Matrix movie as well, where Neo is awakened in this desolate real world, as it were. And here the facehugger is extended essentially from the micro world into the macro world that's outside of the egg. Kane himself is approaching the egg with eagerness and some prudence at first before he sort of dives into the egg, which is not the smartest thing to do, but still better than what was portrayed in the Prometheus movie. There's also sort of hidden sexuality contained within the structure of the egg, where we see this slit in the top. This X formation certainly mimics that of a vagina, and I believe an earlier concept was to have a sort of V-shaped, which would have made this even more clear. There is a certain conception where the facehugger first transforms the face of its victims before penetrating through the cavity region, the throat region, and directly impregnates the host with an embryo. So there's certainly a lot of sexual undertones here, which Gagger would have been fully aware of, and I believe tried to incorporate as best possible in the movie itself. We see a nice atmospheric shift in the movie after Kane has been attacked, to the long-winding pace that you see with the exterior shot of the derelict. The derelict itself has a rather bone-like structure, which again hints at the primordial biological potential / danger which is lurking within. The crew moves back towards essentially where they came from, to get back aboard the ship, and there is a confrontation taking place at the ship, where we see Ripley correctly asserting that bringing back this foreign entity would potentially compromise not only the crew member but the entire ship. And she also cites the standard 24-hour quarantine. We see here the direct confrontation between the archaic, biological, genetically engineered terror and the technologically induced artificial environment of the Nostromo coming at play here. There's in fact a great quote from a book by John David Evert, Alien Scene by Scene, where he says the following: "The question thus becomes which regime is stronger, that of Father Science, together with tools that mimic artificial life with artificial conditions, or Mother Right with her serpentine abominations that display a reproductive life force that not even science can contain or convincingly imitate." So there's this power being played out between you're in the realm of the science world and the primordial biological world. On one of the viewings I did have a sort of slight criticism of the film, whereas it would be nice to see some sort of automated protocols coming from the Nostromo itself in regards to the foreign entity being brought aboard the ship. But perhaps, an even more interesting interpretation would be that the automated protocols have been dismantled by Ash himself, or it might be that the responses have been willfully removed by the Weyland-Yutani Corporation. This point in the film also symbolizes the sort of starting rift between the characters on board the ship, where we see ultimately a power exchange taking place between Dallas and that of Ripley later, where ultimately Ripley will prove to be the hero, or the sort of archetypical mother slayer of the film in regards to the alien. We also see ultimately that Ash overrides the interjection from Ripley and opens the doors, much to the dismay of Ripley. We will in fact later learn that Ash is acting on behalf of both his own intellectual curiosity as well as that of the wishes of the Weyland-Yutani Corporation. He's programmed to secure the alien life form at all costs. One might see the attachment of the facehugger to the face as a sort of biological programming meant to take control of the human environment through luring the unbeknownst victim to its net, as it were, here in the form of a biological birth chamber in the form of a reptilian egg structure that we saw earlier. And we also note in the egg that the surrounding environment is a liquid. It seems to be a necessity for the alien being as well, which further emphasizes the sort of evolutionary likeness and adaptation between both the xenomorph creature and that of human beings. While we're studying the facehugger, there is a sort of clinically sterile environment where the medical instruments, such as the laser that we see, Ash wishes to cut off one of the fingers to release the facehugger from the face, and this sort of further emphasizes the precision and exactitude associated with the field of science, as well as the environment, which is, as I noted, very sterile as well. However, we do see that the tools are at odds with what appears to be a alien death trap arachnid, which employs a toxic acid which immediately burns through everything, and we see it burning through the hull of the ship. One might interpret this in witnessing the limitations of science in its initial genesis stages of encountering a totally new organism where no reproducibility of experiment has been carried out before. And this certainly also excites Ash. However, we do note in the film that the facehugger is only a moderate precursor in terms of the danger associated with the xenomorph serpent god, if you will, that we will follow later. Having already exposed the microenvironment of the ship to the foreign alien invasion, the crew, with the exception of Ripley, continue to play it rather loose in terms of the foreign threat. Both Brett and Parker, for example, seem to seek refuge in humor and are both more annoyed, it seems, than frightened of the newly discovered being. There's also this strong over-reliance of the ship's science officer, Ash, and it does not seem to bother really the ship's captain, Dallas, who takes a more evasive and perhaps reckless, you might say, or Ripley would definitely say, approach, stating that he just wants to go home. Dallas certainly appeals to the epistemological authority of Ash and seems to have little interest in confrontation in regards to this subject matter. However, we do see a confrontation being forced through Ripley by locking the ship's doors essentially in front of Dallas. This scene plays in many ways both as a confrontation to what's happening aboard the ship, the sort of panic mode emerges, as well as it suggests something more latent. The scene in fact plays as a sort of lover's quarrel, which suggests a previous romantic entanglement between the two characters. It's in fact interesting to note that through some alien screen tests, the actors did portray a scene where the actors would make love to relieve stress while being stranded on the planetoid. And it's certainly hinted out through the films. I mean, there are various subtle gesticulations and body language throughout the film, which supports this theory that Dallas and Ripley were at the very least sort of a on and off romantic partners. You can see this especially here, and where they are finding the dead xenomorph, and Ripley automatically grabs Dallas in sort of tender, romantic way, you might imagine. But there are other subtle hints as well. We see Kane ultimately being awakened after the initial attack of the facehugger. The scene itself acts almost like a parody of Rebirth, in which Kane himself makes very little of the event. He seems a lot more dismissive than being terrified or fazed by the event. And it's decided that instead of going directly into the hibernation, slash freezing chamber, the crew makes another and finally deadly mistake in partaking in this sort of Last Supper symbolic imitation or mockery, if you will, of a last meal. One might interpret this as all the crew members except that of Ripley, which have broken some sort of rules of precaution or recklessness. This can be seen in terms of a religious connotation as committing a sin for which all the crew members will be left dead or symbolically crucified, with the exception of Ripley. We see here Kane in the supper scene acting almost out of a sort of primal instinct in the way he's eating and craving more food, giving nutrition essentially to the evolving embryo which has been planted within him. It's also revealing that we see here Ash and the way he's studying Kane almost like a scientific object of inquiry, a live experiment which needs to be tracked. The iconic chestburster scene is perhaps the most iconic scene in the whole film. I mean, even Stanley Kubrick is noted to have been impressed by the scene, especially in terms of the technical aspects, which he enjoyed greatly. He must have been inspired in terms of the film The Shining later, which is also a horror film. The chestburster sort of acts as a distortion of human birth, in which the vessel, in this case, Kane, is left dead, much like some species of spiders in which the female practice cannibalism. After the mating process, the incubator is left completely without consideration after serving as a vessel. One can also draw a parallel to the disease of cancer, which for women must feel especially menacing, given that the process pertains to growing foreign building blocks of malice cells, which may be seen as mocking the very process of birth, where both events pertain to the development of cells. Here, through the human interpretation, a symbolic reimagined mockery of birth is taking place, and which gives rise to a destructive, odious, diabolical being, which may be seen as taking place in some sort of alien antichrist figure. We do know that the android David in subsequent films has engineered at least some alien structures, if not this alien structure, which begs the question of Father Science again taking control of the metaphysical vulva, as it were, through a process of artificial insemination of sorts. We see this directly here through the embryo being directly implanted through the throat region, which subsequently grows. Following the chestburster scene, we see the ship's captain Dallas in a more defeated, almost like lethargic state. He's certainly not taking full control of the situation. This sets up the scene for future events in which Ripley will eventually take more and more of a command, especially following the confrontation with Ash that we see later in the film. Brett is the first crew member that encounters this alien, and it's the first encounter in which the alien creature has reached its peak potential in the form of the famous xenomorph creature that we love. We also see from the landscapes behind me that we are moving from a industrial landscape of the Nostromo interior to a more transformed meat factory decor, as it were. This is very much enhanced through the use of chains and dripping water, which we see Brett himself immersing himself in. The resemblance here is also to the paintings of Francis Bacon, for example. You can check out his painting Meat or something, and a lot of his other art as well. There are certainly earlier inspirations there, both in terms of the alien creature as well as the meat factory decor. Alien creature itself certainly has this very serpentine look to it. It's sort of a mix between that of several creatures, and it brings some thoughts about to even perhaps earlier inspirations for the alien life form in the creature through Hieronymus Bosch, for example. He used, specifically biomechanical incorporations as well as strange amalgamations of animals with machines. See, I brought up some paintings here. First of Bacon and Hieronymus Bosch, you see here. I mean, Hieronymus Bosch, his greatness as an artist certainly exceeds that of Bacon and Geiger, in my opinion. And I believe also Geiger stated that the Bosch's depictions of hell were photographs for him, so certainly had a strong influence on him as well. And Brett's death as the final nail in the coffin, or final confirmation, if you will, of the hopelessness of the situation in which the aggression against the foreign beast seems to be almost of a mythological proportion. Alright, so we'll leave it off there, and if you have any comments, suggestions, questions, whatever, you can leave them below. And I'll see you next time for the final part 3 of the film analysis of Alien.